You are now entering Clearview, Illinois. This tale is Coffee is for Killers, Cold Brew is for Cold-Blooded Killers. Kim had seen things that others hadn't. No, that was incorrect. Kim had remembered things that most people hadn't. She nervously jittered from too much coffee and smoked like she needed it to breathe. Clearview was a hotbed of activity, supernatural activity. Most people didn't report things, and others just forgot them outright. Kim was collecting stories straight from the mouths of those that lived through them. She waited nervously at a coffee shop, one of the few that bothered to stay open late into the night. Kim found that the casino was starting to subtly change the behaviors of the people in its orbit, which reminded her of animals forced to adapt to industry reshaping their habitat. Kim herself had several different encounters of a supernatural nature, and unlike most, she couldn't lock those memories away and never let them out. But at the same time, she thought it'd be much better if she did. The things she saw shaped her into the paranoid mess she was today. She was afraid of her own shadow, needing the calm of nicotine to relax, yet craving the caffeine of coffee to keep her eyes open. Anytime she seemed to close her eyes, that's when they crept up on her. Every time she collected her story, she ran the risk of running into them, so she didn't take any of these meetings lightly. In fact, she was leery to even meet at night for any reason. It wasn't as if monsters didn't operate in the day. It just wasn't their natural time. If she was going to move in the night, at the very least she was going to do it here or at the casino where there were eyes on them. A man in a trench coat and a brimmed hat moved into the coffee shop with a similar paranoid energy to Kim's. He looked around and ordered a drink under the name Bertram. That was the signal to Kim she was talking to the correct guy. She raised her drink and shook it slightly so he could feel her out. After a few sideways glances, the man decided he could sit down and have a talk. "Are you Truth Academy?" the man, who was to be called Bertram, asked. "I am. Are you sure you weren't followed?" "I think I wasn't." "Do you think or do you know?" Kim asked with a reserved but serious bent. "I wasn't followed," Bertram doubled down, but this time with more confidence. Kim looked around nervously. "So, Bertram, you said you had a supernatural encounter. Tell me about it," Kim said as she turned her phone on to record. "I don't want to just say what I think happened because then conjecture comes into play. I was out in Beeman's Grove and I saw gangly kids playing in the cornfield. I have reason to believe they were otherworldly visitors." Kim, while she didn't rule out aliens, she didn't necessarily believe in them, but she couldn't dismiss them either. Her telling a person they were crazy was like an inmate in an asylum attempting to diagnose another inmate. Kim listened to his tale, trying her best to remain neutral, but at the same time not quite believing a word of it. "Did you manage to snap some pictures, or do you have some sort of proof?" The nervous man went into his jacket pocket for his phone and showed her fuzzy images taken at a distance of what essentially could be anyone or technically anything. "It's not good enough?" he asked. "It's thin. Tell me more. What were you doing? Did they see you? Why are you nervous? Do you think someone is chasing you?" Kim asked. Kim tended not to meet people in person because she could weed out who legitimately had encounters and who was just crazy. Also, most people didn't believe her. In fact, some people would forget details after the fact or that it happened at all. The reason she stepped out at all tonight was the hope that she could find an ally in this, a real way to uncover things like this with a partner to watch her back. "I guess they didn't see me and they were just walking around. I didn't get close enough to understand anything." "Then why are you nervous if they didn't see you and nobody knows who you are?" Bertram nodded as if she was correct and had a point. Kim witnessed his entire demeanor change from frantic paranoia to calm resignation. She looked around, taking stock of everyone in the coffee shop. There were too many people here. 7 people. Nothing was going to happen with all these witnesses. The man took in a sigh and pinched the bridge of his nose. Kim, what are we going to do with you? Why do you want to turn this peaceful little town into Transylvania? Every time I look up, it's Dracula's this and werewolves that. If you knew how few of them we had, it'd shock you, said Bertram. Then what are you? Now, that would be telling, said the mystery man, wagging his finger in rhythm. You must have wanted to see me for some reason, right? What is it? Kim asked. I was hoping you could forget the whole thing, and if you couldn't, well, he said, letting Kim's imagination fill in the blanks. So deaf or join you? Hey, nobody said we were giving you choices that good. I'll call the cops and wait here until they get here. The man in the hat said smugly, I'll give you odds that you'll never be able to touch that phone before I destroy you. Kim made a defeated and nervous laugh. These are a lot of people, even for you, whatever you are. Oh, you think that matters, huh? If you're so sure, reach for it. If you think you can, said Bertram, who folded his arms in challenge. For a moment, the two stared at each other as if daring the other to make the first move. Kim moved first. Bertram reached across the table in a blur. When Kim looked at Bertram's hand, it was a long-fingered talon. Bertram coughed up bile. The white phlegm graduated to green as if he were vomiting up something inside of him that had no business being there. His face elongated as plastic being stretched. Kim stepped back as if to bolt, but by then, not only had the few people who had been there not reacted in terror as warranted by the situation, they stood up and gagged in the same way. Kim ran for the door, and a woman who appeared as if she were working on a screenplay on her laptop barred her way, its face stretching out, its teeth becoming long and malleable until they were as big as horse teeth. She turned to Bertram, and his face was so distorted he was no longer capable of speech. The woman behind the counter gagged, and her stomach swelled until the slimy head of a person hung out of her throat, struggling to be born. As ghastly and unnatural as it was, Kim kept her head about her. She had been in more situations like this than she cared to admit, and panic was the absolute first thing that got you killed. The intellect in her wanted to watch the barista finish her metamorphosis to see what ungodly mockery of life she spewed forth, but the survivor in her won the exchange. Though she was outnumbered, she wasn't without some form of defense. Kim snatched a can out of her purse and flung it to the floor. She closed her eyes and looked away as the mind-numbing flashbang erupted. The moment the sound rang out, she bolted for the door. She ran at the malformed mockery full speed and knocked it over, seeing it had been temporarily blinded and off balance. The monstrous barista had half a human body, struggling to slip out of his throat, which seemed impossibly too narrow to accommodate it. The drooling fluids and bile added in extracting this thing. Kim didn't watch. She kept running to her car as the mockeries clumsily stumbled out behind her. Kim hopped in her minivan and gunned the engine. As beasts that looked as if their bodies were pieced together through the inaccurate estimations of a small child's drawing swarmed the street. Kim gunned the engine and watched the monsters grow smaller in the distance. She breathed a long sigh of relief when the beast faded from sight. She had to be even more careful and go even more underground than before. She wished that she could have figured out what that creature was vomiting up. It felt as if it would have been useful. As she adjusted her rear view, she was suddenly startled by a nude, slime-covered doppelganger of herself. As Kim attempted to hit the brakes, the slime-covered mimic caused her to inadvertently jerk the wheel, spiraling the car out of control. You are now exiting Clearview, Illinois. I hope you enjoyed the trip.